Hi Tanvi, how are you?
Hey Gaurav, I'm fine. What about you?
I'm doing great. I'm reading this book, India's Struggle for Independence, written by Bipin Chandra. It's a nice book. Got some new information.
Oh, nice. Incidentally, I'm also reading a book about similar time period called Raj: Making and Unmaking of British India, written by Lawrence James. It's quite interesting to read the history of British Raj from the point of view of a British historian.
Hey, why don't you tell me about what he has to say about the First War of Independence of India, one which the British called Sepoy Mutiny of 1857?
Yeah, sure. First, I'd like to say that the chapter names in this book are quite interesting. The chapter that deals with the 1857 mutiny is called The Sahib Paid No Attention, the Raj Imperiled. So, according to him, a lot of events were happening on the eve of 1857. For example, the Indian princes and the nobility, like Nana Sahib Lakshmi Bai, the Rani of Jhansi, had some grievances with the recent policy changes by Lord Dalhousie, the Governor General of India. On the other hand, a lot of rural population in the northwestern India was also unhappy with the taxation policies of the East India Company. The recent Hindu Widows Remarriage Act of 1856 and several other laws were seen as the company intervening in the religious affairs. It was believed that the long term policy of the company was to impose Christianity over the Indians. Another factor was a new type of gun called the Enfield gun. This gun was introduced to the Indian troops in 1856-1857, and it was rumored that the cartridges were lubricated with pig and cow fat, which were taboos in the Muslim and Hindu religions respectively. Many official statements were released refuting this, but they couldn't convince the soldiers otherwise. Because of all these events, the Raj was rapidly losing credibility around this time, according to the author. In March of 1857, the 19th and the 34th Regiments of Bengal Native Infantry were situated in Barakpur, Kolkata, where an important event took place. There was a soldier named Mangal Pandey in the 34th Regiment, and he was furious about this cartridge issue. On the 29th of March, he incited his fellow soldiers to join him in a rebellion. A short conflict ensued, and a couple of British soldiers were wounded. Eventually, he was court martialed and he was executed on the 8th of April. As a response to this event, the 34th Regiment was disarmed in the presence of British forces, and the 19th Regiment was disbanded. The sepoys were humiliated via these punishments, and they were sent back to the communities where they would no longer have any special standing. A few other regiments were also treated in a similar humiliating manner. A pattern was set which evoked a strong reaction from the sepoys. What does your book have to say about this?
The reasons for the discontent mentioned in the book are same, though there are some authors in India, like V.D. Savarkar, who claim that it wasn't sudden uprising, but a planned conspiracy. But in the absence of any reliable account left behind by the rebels, it is difficult to be certain. After the Mangal Pandey incident, the next big event and the precursor to a widespread mutiny was the revolt in Meerut. In Meerut, 85 men were court-martialed and humiliated on 9th May. The next day, the Indian troops led by 3rd Bengal Light Cavalry broke into revolt. They freed the 85 comrades from the jail and 800 other prisoners. After taking over Meerut, they headed straight for Delhi, and thus began the First War of Independence. From nobility, Nana Sahib was leading in Kanpur, Begum Hazrat Mahal in Lucknow, Khan Bahadur in Rohilkhand, Rani Lakshmibai in Jhansi, Kunwar Singh in Jagdishpur. Khan Bahadur Shah, the last Mughal, was declared as the Emperor of India. The author mentions that not all from the nobility were willing to lead the revolt, and many of them joined hesitatingly once it started. Even the most outstanding leader, Rani Lakshmibai, initially offered to keep Jhansi safe for the British if they would grant her wishes. When it was clear that her wishes won't be granted, she joined the Sepoys and became one of the most formidable enemies of the British. Civil rebellion followed the revolt of the Sepoys. Government buildings were destroyed, the treasury was plundered, the magazine was sacked, barracks and courthouses were burnt. The revolt thus resulted in a popular uprising. Were there any military excesses during this revolt?
Yes, I wanted to talk exactly about that. So the mutineers were taking control of various regions as you described, but the situation in the city of Kanpur was a bit different. Command of this North Indian city was in the hands of Sir General Hugh Wheeler. There were a bunch of regiments situated in Kanpur as the news of rebellion reached. As you have mentioned earlier, the mutineers from Kanpur requested Nana Sahib to lead the rebellion there. After some conflict, General Wheeler struck a deal with the mutineers for the safe passage of British to Allahabad. However, on the 27th of June, Nana Sahib ordered his troops to ambush the refugees. Most of them died as a result of this unexpected ambush, and there were only a few lucky escapes. This was proclaimed to be a great victory by the rebels. All these events provoked a response from the British, which came in the form of reinforcements from Allahabad. The British relief force was much smaller in number, but it quickly overcame the rebels led by Nana Sahib. In a panic, he ordered the slaughter of the surviving women and children, but afterwards, Nana Sahib and the rebels abandoned the city and the British took over. The British who recaptured Kanpur were horrified by the sight of the slaughter, especially that of women and children. This emotion was instantly transformed into that of fury and revenge, and such reactions were not only limited to Kanpur. The accounts of atrocities by the rebels were exaggerated manifold, and sometimes entirely fabricated stories reached Britain. This vengeance might have resulted in some atrocities from the British side. For example, in an event near Delhi, a British soldier burned 23 sepoys alive. What does your book have to say about such incidents?
Not much, but it is believed that exaggerated and sometimes false stories of atrocities were used by the British to justify their own atrocities and the scale of punishment to the prisoners. By the way, two names stand out for their valor in the history of 1857 war: Tatya Tope and Queen of Jhansi, Rani Lakshmibai. The Queen of Jhansi died fighting on 17 June 1858. General Hugh Ross, who defeated her, paid high tribute to his enemy when he said that here lay the woman who was the only man among the rebels. Tatya Tope, who successfully carried on guerrilla warfare against the British until April 1859, was betrayed by a zamindar, captured, and put to the death by the British. Well, here comes the part I find fascinating. Even if there was no planning and organization before the revolt, it was important that it was done once the rebel started. Immediately after the capture of Delhi, a letter was addressed to the rulers of all the neighboring states and of Rajasthan, soliciting their support and inviting them to participate. In Delhi, a court of administrators was established, which was responsible for all matters of the state. The court consisted of 10 members, 6 from the army and 4 from the civilian departments. All decisions were taken by a majority vote. The court conducted the affairs of the state in the name of the emperor. One British official described it as something like a constitutional monarchy. Bahadur Shah was recognized as the emperor by all the rebel leaders. Coins were struck and orders were issued in his name. Rebel leaders conducted the administration in the name of Mughal emperor. It is also important to note that the first impulse of the rebels was always to proceed to Delhi, whether they were in Meerut, Kanpur, or Jhansi. The need to create an organization and a political institution to preserve the gains was certainly felt. But in the face of the British counter-offensive, there was no chance to build on these early nebulous ideas. For more than a year, the rebels carried on their struggle against heavy odds and were crushed ruthlessly by the British in the end. Why do you think rebels failed in the end?
Interestingly, the author doesn't mention the reasons explicitly, so we have to read between the lines here. Firstly, It seems that the author implies that the mutineers were disunited and they lacked a centralized leadership, even though Bahadur Shah was nominally recognized as the emperor. Although we have discussed some key figures from the rebel side, they did not have authority over all of the rebels. The author seems to suggest, quite dismissively I think, that the rebels in each area were acting in their own interest and not for a common cause. Although there is some truth in this, I think we should take some of it with a grain of salt. Secondly, the rebels lacked the then modern technology. The British had access to telegraph, by which they could coordinate forces located in various geographical regions with each other. On the other hand, the rebels had no such means of communication, and so they could not coordinate. This ties in with the first reason, that is, it is one of the reasons why the rebels could not have a centralized leadership. Although the British forces had access to firearms and ammunition, greater in terms of both quality as well as quantity. Rebels, on the other hand, had to obtain it from looting the British storehouses. Thirdly, for the reasons we won't go into here, the rebellion was limited entirely into some parts of northern India. In particular, Calcutta, Bombay, and Madras, the three strongholds of the company, remained loyal. Even the recently conquered northern province of Punjab remained loyal to the British. Therefore, the foothold of the company remained strong, and it never faced an existential crisis. I think these are some of the reasons why the rebels didn't enjoy any long term success. Could you tell me about the events that took place after the mutiny was put down by the British?
Sure, Indian soldiers were brutally killed without any trial. Bahadur Shah was tried and exiled to Rangoon. Nana Sahib refused to give in and finally escaped to Nepal in the beginning of 1859, hoping to renew the struggle. Kuwar Singh, despite his old age, was too quick for the British and constantly kept them guessing till his death on 9th May 1858. The rebellion saw the end of the East India Company's rule in India. In August, by the Government of India Act 1858, the company was formally dissolved and its ruling powers over India were transferred to the British Crown. A new British government department, the India Office, was created to handle the governance of India, and its head, the Secretary of State for India, was entrusted with formulating Indian policy. The Governor General of India gained a new title, Viceroy of India. British minimized the religious intervention. To increase the consultation between ruler and ruled, they introduced some political changes, drawing Indians into government at a local level. Of course, this was on a limited scale. British reorganized the army. Now there were fewer European officers, but they associated themselves far more closely with their soldiers, while more responsibility was given to the Indian officers. The British increased the ratio of British to Indian soldiers within India. From 1861, Indian artillery was replaced by British units, except for a few mountain batteries. Indian army was reorganized based on castes, the classic strategy of divide and rule. And these post-rebellion changes formed the basis of the military organization of British India until the early 20th century.
Oh, it seems the rebellion had far reaching influence on the British Raj. By the way, I have to go now. It was really nice to know the different viewpoints of such an important event in the Indian struggle of independence. Should we continue this conversation for the entire struggle? I find it quite interesting to compare and contrast the two points of views.
Yeah, sure. Why not? We can discuss the foundation of Indian National Congress. Bye for now. We will talk soon.
Okay, bye.